All right, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I apologize for the technical difficulties. You know, technology is great when it works. Ashley, you can go ahead and advance the slide, please. Welcome to the Legislative Policy and Workforce Support monthly call. My name is Christy Ballou, and I am the Director of Certification. We will go ahead and get started on our monthly call slides. Next slide, please. First thing we want to talk through and just make sure that everybody is aware is Teacher Leader Summit is coming back, making a comeback in 2022. Next slide. So the Teacher Leader Summit will be held on Tuesday, May 31st through June 2nd. It is in New Orleans at the Convention Center. We're celebrating both making a comeback and our 10th year anniversary for this particular event. Regular registration will close on April 15th or at sellout. The tickets this year are a little bit different. They're available first come, first serve. There are no allocations. We do ask that you encourage the following educator groups to attend. All of these folks will benefit from the sessions that are provided. Teachers, teacher leaders, librarians, counselors, school leaders, system leaders, teacher preparation providers, art teachers, early childhood directors, all of those groups will have sessions geared towards them. When you select your educators to attend, make sure that you're prioritizing sending those that work directly within content areas like career and tech, art, high school experience, ELA, early childhood, STEM, science, literacy, social studies, technology, instructional best practices, student well-being, school system, or school planning, curriculum and assessment, and then world languages. Based on participant feedback, we've made some enhancements this year to Teacher Leader Summit. One of those was including an approved event app that'll allow networking with other attendees. That app is WOVA. The increased registration value, we did that by including t-shirts and tote bags in the ticket price. That way everyone will get one of each of those, and the designs are super cute this year. We're including networking opportunities throughout the event, including socials, and we've adjusted the length of the day. The Education Expo, of course, is going to return this year with high quality professional learning partners and nonprofit organizations. If you have any questions, of course, please contact the LDOE events team at ldoeevents@la.gov with questions. All right, so the agenda for the rest of our day, of course, you know, we're transitioning, but we're still going to stay on this particular call through June. It will include certification, BESI updates, legislative updates, healthy communities, and then, of course, our important call summary. After June of this year, it will be a different call, and we'll communicate that on our upcoming calls, which calls you can find us on. So the first thing I want to talk through are some upcoming application changes. I know we revamped most of our applications in August of last year, and we changed some of our processing protocols as well. In doing that, we noticed that there were some little nuances that we needed to change for some of our applications. Also, there have been some updates in law, and then the rest of our policy that we submitted in August, of course, has come off of notice of intent, or actually, yeah, today's 21st, yeah, actually has come off of notice of intent. So we're going to need to go ahead and update some of our applications. Those new applications will be available by April 1st. And as usual, we'll give that 1 month grace period to where either application can be submitted. The new applications that will be required to be used by May 1st. And it's not all of our applications that we're updating. It's a few of them that are affected by these policy changes or law changes. That includes the EV, which is that evaluation, add-on, course approval, and name change application, the EL, which is the educational leader, that AT, which is the ancillary teaching, the AS is the ancillary service, the out-of-state, or OS, and then the initial application. Those are the applications that are going to be updated, ready by April 1st and required by May 1st. In between that time, either can be used. The next slide provides an update around reading competencies. So there's been some recent legislation. There's been additional questions surrounding these teaching reading competencies. And between the two of those, the additional questions and the legislation, we've had some intense conversations with our legal team. And there's been a little bit of back and forth on the interpretation of that law that speaks specifically to teaching reading. However, our legal team has landed at a more broad interpretation of the law regarding teaching reading. So when we're issuing initial certification, the legal team has authorized us to be looking for the following things. For traditional programs, nothing has really changed. We're still going to be looking for either 3 semester hours, 6 semester hours, or 9 semester hours. But for alternate programs, we'll be looking for either that BESI adopted teaching reading exam, which is the 5206, which is currently adopted, or some signed assurances indicating that the applicant took the contact hour equivalent of the semester hours. Now, for the applications in queue, they won't have that new updated attestation. So what we're going to do is we're going to reply to any application in queue that's missing one of these items, and we'll send that new updated document over and request that you send it over via email. It doesn't have any PII on it, so it can be replied to via email. We'll give it a timeline of when you can reply to that with. And then if that's not replied to at that point, then we'll submit an official declination letter and give you the 90 days to get it completed and turned into us by as a single. We're trying to do that as a professional courtesy. It's not y'all's fault or our fault that we didn't have this particular document as a part of the application. It's a new interpretation, a new legal interpretation. And so to follow in alignment or be in alignment with the law, we're going to provide that to you. So we're going to reply first via email and request that you submit that signed assurance document to us. And we'll provide you with a new document. One other thing to flag here is that there will be some literacy updates to certification requirements brought to BESI later this year. And we are continuing to look at both current legislation and there's actually some proposed legislation around teaching reading as well. And so just know that there may be some additional changes that come down the pipeline in the future. As soon as those changes are decided on, approved on, or made, we will let you know. Education changes, and so we're going with the flow and ask that you all do the same. One other note I would like to say is that we have a lot of new certification specialists that are in training. And so if you are a teacher preparation provider that happens to be on this monthly call with us, we're going to be reaching out to you to request an updated list of your reading coursework. We haven't done that in a while. My experienced specialists are really good and experienced at looking at those reading courses. However, with newer specialists, they're not as experienced in doing that. And so we're going to ask you to submit us an updated list for your semester hours that you're using, your coursework that you're using for the semester hours required. The next item we're going to talk through is our CBC legislation. So some of you may be familiar with House Bill 156. It's a certification bill that's submitted in the current legislative session. So I wanted to flag it for all on this call and to make sure that y'all are understanding exactly what it is and why it is. So the first thing I want to do is give you some background on it. Current Louisiana law and practice that we've had in place for 30 years or more. Basically, our Louisiana law indicates that when you all as a school system request a criminal history or a background check for employment purposes, our law states that a separate copy of this criminal history report is sent directly from Louisiana State Police to us at LDOE. Well, if you go back to March of 2020, Louisiana State Police was audited by the FBI. The FBI actually met with us at LDOE. They were inquiring about some of our criminal history processes, some of our purposes, the uses, all of that. They had lots of questions for us. Basically, what they were trying to do was determine if employment and certification were one purpose or two different purposes. Because federal regulation requires that a criminal history check be done for one purpose. While we argued and thought that the two are tied together in essentially one purpose, the FBI came back and determined that a separate criminal history request for certification is needed because it's in fact two different purposes. So that set us, next slide please, Ashley, that set us on our trajectory to figure out, well, what do we do to update and to update our Louisiana law, because essentially our Louisiana law was in violation of federal regulation. So we did a lot of homework, did a lot of research. We researched practices in other states, and there was a whole host of things that happened. In about 37 states, they do require criminal history checks specifically for licensure, in addition to employment. We also looked at our Louisiana laws and tried to figure out what are our options that we had. And we investigated about 5 different options. I'll be honest with you, none of them were great. But what we did is we tried to see which option suited all laws, all processes, all, the protection of our children, which option suited everything the best. And so the option that met most of or all of those needs was the option to amend revised statute 1715 and 15587.1. Just keep in mind that we had our legal team doing a lot of this review and looking at these options. I'm not a lawyer, so we definitely relied on our legal team for this. And what this option will do is it will require a criminal history check for certification specifically. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the proposed bill during the current legislative session, which is House Bill 156. What it does is it updates revised statute 1715 to authorize Louisiana Department of Education and BESI, when they need to do a records review, it authorizes us to request a criminal history report for certification purposes. So we're meeting that federal regulation requirement to have a separate check for a separate purpose. What it does is it authorizes Louisiana State Police to send that criminal history to us for certification. So I learned in this process, you have to have a law in the books, not only to allow you to request it, but you have to have a law in the books to allow you to receive it. And so this particular amendment will do, or update to this piece of legislation will do both of those things. It also allows for a future effective date. If I'm going to be completely honest, we're not equipped. We don't have a system in place to request these or receive these. For all of the educators, the copies that we receive in a different manner. We don't have a way to request them. So this will allow for a future effective date. It will also allow for like a transitionary period or a grace period, so to speak, and a kind of an expanded timeline or a deadline for when this criminal history will need to be completed. It will also allow us to charge a processing fee for that because we don't have the staff to process all of these additional CBCs that we'll be getting now. What we found in doing our digging is a couple of things. Sometimes school systems don't request these. Sometimes when they request these, they don't know what they're looking at. And so, we've estimated that there'll be an increase in the volume of the actual criminal histories that we receive. And of course, you have all of the educators that get certified that are not necessarily employed in Louisiana. So based off of our estimates, we feel like there's going to be an increase in the CBCs that were sent when we request them. And to be able to review those, we'll need to have staff, and we're 100% self-generated funds. So this will allow us to charge a fee for processing those. It also will allow the update of the actual problem law, 15587.1, and it removes the language in that law that is actually in violation of federal regulation. And then it will limit the wrapbacks for provisions of just 15587.1 C2, which is the new changes to the law, because if we don't limit that there, then we're right back where we started from with our rat backs, being that the rat backs would be sent to us for all of those requested for employment. And so we can't do that either. That's in violation of federal law. So what this option does is it really updates the statute that's in conflict with federal regulation. It doesn't conflict with any other certification laws, so it's actually in alignment with other certification laws. It's also in alignment with policy and practices that have been going on for the last 30 years, also with current trends across the nation as well. It also allows us to continue to keep Chapter 9. You know, Bessie requested that we tighten educator accountability a little while back. And so it allows us to do that if we update this law. Let's see, what else does it do? It also, of course, maintains that layer of protection for children and kind of a check and balance system for school systems. You know, there's been some recent pieces in the news where, you know, educators were in a school system, either a background check wasn't requested or a background check was misinterpreted, you know, and so this is just an extra check and balance in place for that. Next slide, please. So it's going to change our practice just a little bit. And the way it's going to change the practice currently, an educator will complete teacher preparation. They're recommended for certification. We issue the certification. And then when they're employed, a criminal history check will be requested. At that point, right now, we receive a copy of the CBC, we review it, and we take action on the certificate as necessary. So in some instances, they're issued certification, and maybe they shouldn't be because they have something on their background that would prohibit them from having certification. So then we refer them to Bessie for a records review or revocation. And then, of course, anytime there's any kind of subsequent update to their CBC via a wrap back with a new charge or new conviction, we take action accordingly. Well, now with the proposed policy will be they complete the teacher preparation, and as a part of the recommendation for certification, we will request a criminal history check be done from Louisiana State Police. We'll receive that and we'll review with our legal staff to determine if someone is eligible for certification, and then issue or deny certification based off of the CBC and all of their other requirements, of course. And then after issuance, the only time we would take action is when we receive a wrap back that says, you know, they have an additional charge or conviction on their certification. So to our fee structure, keep in mind that the way that the legislation is worded is it allows a start date, and between that start date and 5 years after that, the first time an educator requests any kind of transaction on their certification, the name change, an add-on, a renewal, the first time that they request that, they will be required to do a criminal history check as part of that transaction. And that's the only time. It's a one-time fee for that. It's a one-time criminal history check. And then after that, our wrap back legislation falls in place, and we'll only get them if an educator has another offense, and there won't be a charge for processing any of that. So it's a one-time fee over the lifetime of an educator's certificate, and there's a 5-year time period in which they can get that criminal history check completed. What is the total cost of a CBC? It's something I'm pretty sure that most of you are asking. So the processing fee for LDOE will be $25. The federal background check fee, which the law states that we can collect it and we're going to pass it on to all of those entities. But depending on how the system is built, it may be something that they collect themselves. You know, if it goes to a link and you pay for this, that, or the other, it's divvied up, it may happen in the system. That hasn't been built out yet, but it may be something that we collect and send on, or it may be something they collect themselves. But the federal background check fee is $13.25. The state background check fee is $26. The vendor fingerprint process at this time is $9.78, and there's a sheriff's technology fee that's a required part of that is $5. So it's a total one-time fee of approximately $80. $79.03, I think, is the total exactly. But it's a one-time fee over the lifetime of a certificate. Are there any questions? That was a lot of information, I realize. Please feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat.
This change in fee structure is not happening in the foreseeable future. It's after the system's built.
Yes, that's correct. And so, well, the first thing that happens is the law will have to pass, and then it will give us a start or an implementation start date, and then we will message that out, what that implementation start date. I believe what the law says is like June or July 1st of next year, 2023. The date has changed a little bit. I'll have to go back and check that. But I believe the date that's in the proposed legislation currently is July 1st of 2023 will be the start date. And then we'll have 5 years between now and then. But that will be the time when there'll be a fee for the criminal history check. Yeah. Great question. And we will definitely message all that out. The system will have to be built, all of that. Any other questions?
Christy, we had one come through in the chat. If an employee has a background check less than 5 years old, can we submit a copy of the results along with the application instead of paying that fee?
No, unfortunately, that would be against federal regulations. So what we've learned is sharing of information is also prohibited. That's part of the issue as well. In addition to the fact it goes right back to the crux of the matter is it was an employment check that was done for employment purposes. And because it was done for that purpose, the FBI says that we can't use it. So at some point, what's going to happen is any of the wrapbacks that we have currently also that are coming in as a result of those employment checks are going to stop because they're part of the quote unquote tainted CBC that was originally requested. Essentially, the FBI is saying we should have never gotten a copy of these employment background checks. Even though our Louisiana law allows us to, it should have never been in place because that's in violation of federal regulation.
I still want to ask. So Christy, Melinda Hardy, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. And I don't mean to duplicate the question. So in other words, that person who will be applying for the initial certification, you're saying will also be required to have the civil scan done again, in essence, and it's going to be sent directly to you all. Will personnel also receive copies of it?
No, ma'am, because that's part of the issue. Like you'll have to request your own copy, we'll have to request our own copy. It's not ideal, and to be honest, to us, it seems a little duplicative, but according to the FBI, it is in violation of federal regulation. And so we're just trying to make everything right.
Understood. We will currently have, as someone questioned, I was walking across to Carrie's office. My sound system isn't working, but we will have on file currently that person's civil scan, and obviously they would be approved to be employed as they will be an employee of ours seeking certification. So
exactly. The employability law is completely separate, and of course, we don't get into the matters of employment. You know, that's prohibited in the Louisiana Constitution too. So yes, if you have it on file for you, then that directs whether you can employ that person or not. But because there are laws for certification that say we can or cannot issue certification based on XYZ offense, then we have to have our own CBC requested for certification purposes to determine whether or not they're eligible for certification. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yes. For initial certification and those seeking out of state as well, I think you mentioned, correct?
Correct. And what'll happen is it'll be for renewals or anything else like that as well. So during that 5-year period, so I'm a certified educator. If I'm going to come to a district and be employed, or say I'm employed already, If I'm up for renewal after this law passes, when I submit my request for renewal, part of that request will be me requesting a criminal history check, so that can go, it can now be under our certification CBC, and any rat backs that come through after that will be for that, so that we can continue maintaining, clear criminal history checks on all of our educators. So even existing educators will be subject to this, but it will only happen once, and we'll do it for the first transaction that happens during that 5-year period, if that makes sense.
OMG.
I know. There's over 50,000 educators out there.
Oh,
I know. We're
yes.
going to need a ton more staff. Yes, I know.
Question as well. It's about the reading, teaching reading stuff. Do we have an ETA on when you're going to be reaching out to the program providers so we can get that assurance, and when like the other application is going to be ready?
Yes. So that application that's going to be ready is going to be one of those that's ready for April 1st. Legal, I have an email in my inbox from legal. I'm hoping it's the approval of the new form. If it's the approval of the new form, we're going to start reaching out this week for the applications that are in queue and send that out to you all via email to say, hey, please get this signed within, by the end of the week, or, whatever, depending on when we send it out. And then if not, then we'll decline it and say you have 90 days to get this form to us. But yeah, I hope that email that's sitting in my inbox right now is legal saying, yes, your form is good.
Okay, so I know I was part of this issue. So I took down a bunch of applications, so now I can put them back up.
Yeah.
Okay, because I didn't want to clog y'all's stuff up with stuff that I knew, wasn't gonna be.
Yeah. And look, if you need to schedule an office hours appointment to expedite, absolutely feel free to do so.
That's my favorite.
We're caught in the middle of this legal advice too, so we're trying to do the best we can to serve our clients. So,
Emily, thank you.
Happy to do so. Any other questions? All right. Well, I will pass it on to my colleague, Ashley Townsend.
And I have a few updates for you on policy that passed at our most recent BESI meeting in March. My email address is ashley.townsend@la.gov. If you have questions regarding policy, waivers, anything like that, feel free to reach out. The new waiver request form for next school year should be available on the website now. You can fill out that form and email it to me and we'll get it processed. We're asking for all waiver requests for next year to be submitted by June 30th. And again, just wanted to remind everyone of the intra-district transfer website information. This policy should have been updated now. I know I've spoken with a few districts who are in the process of updating your district policy. I believe that's the JBCE policy for most of you. You can email a copy of that, Word, PDF, any kind of version like that is okay, to systemrelations@la.gov. Again, this is an update to your existing policy. The main things that are being added will be a definition of capacity for each school, or how your district will define capacity for each school when the question arises. Specify the transfer request period, which has to be at least March 1st through March 28th. If you prefer to extend the transfer request period through the summer, that's fine. It just needs to at least include that March 1st through 28th period. And then a plan for providing parents and legal guardians of students in schools that receive D or F letter grades with the information outlined in statute, which I believe most of your policies already had in place. We are requesting that any denied transfer requests be denied in writing, because part of the legislation that passed last year provides for an appeal of denied transfer requests, and that information will be on the school choice page of the LDE website very soon. We had several new policy revisions approved at BESI a few weeks ago. First, we had updates to Bulletin 118 and 746 regarding test security, cheating, and actions that can be taken on teacher credentials. Bulletin 745, temporary authorization to teach, was moved to a section within Bulletin 746 to be along with all the other teacher credentialing information. Bulletin 1964, you'll see that that's the revised social studies standards. Those were approved. Teaching and learning team is working on an implementation timeline, and they'll have updated information to you on that very soon. Additionally, they have a big number of sessions scheduled for Teacher Leader Summit with just a lot of work that they've been doing on that to help you prepare for that transition. Again, next year will be a learning year, and then the following year will be full implementation and piloting of the assessment, with the year after that will be that assessment fully implemented. Additionally, we passed our literacy updates. This comprised 4 bulletin revisions. So we had Bulletin 746 updated the ELA competencies that Christy mentioned earlier. We had Bulletin 996 updates to require that foundational literacy and teacher prep programs. Additionally, we have updates to Bulletin 741. This is where you'll find the required literacy training for teachers and other school personnel, as well as a section on literacy instruction, the intervention requirements, different things like that. And then also revisions to Bulletin 1566 regarding parent and guardian notification of reading interventions based on the results of that assessment. It also adds a literacy plan for certain students to your pupil progression plan. So look for updated information on that to come soon as well. For our legislative session, the regular legislative session convened last week on Monday, and it'll adjourn Monday, June 6th. We're currently tracking about 140 bills. But there are others that we kind of have eyes on as well. If you have any questions regarding legislative affairs, you can direct those via email to Ethan Malasaw. We had no updates from our Healthy Communities team this time. And finally, here are some important dates. We have a number of advisory council meetings ahead, and then a quick turnaround this month with BESI committee and board meetings again in April. And feel free to reach out with any questions. Thank you all for joining us today.